this is unfortunately again cold reality, but this is your wake up call. What you need to make is the best game you can make. There is no room in the market right now for a quote unquote good enough game. So growing up, my dad would answer the phone sometimes, and I'm 12 years old. It's a landline, and he would pick up the phone,
Mm-hmm.
and then he would just listen for a few seconds, and he'd slam it down to hang up. And I'm like, Dad, isn't that rude to just hang up on someone like that? And he's like, well, they didn't say the family name right.
Yeah.
And I was like, huh, okay. Can you explain that? And he said, well, it's not a friend. It's not a family member. It's not someone that I know. It's not someone that knows me. If they can't be bothered to say the family name right, why do I want to waste any time on them? So in his mind, it was a salesperson, telemarketer, just someone that was going to waste his time. So he didn't want anything to do with that. Okay, that made sense from his perspective. Fine, fair play. So fast forward a few years, my mom became a massage therapist. She's using one of the extra bedrooms in the house as her office, basically. So one day, someone calls in asking for my mom, and naturally, my dad does the first thing he does when he hears the name not pronounced right. He just hangs up the phone.
Yeah.
And so my mom asks, "Honey, who was that?" "Oh, just someone looking for you." "Well, was it a client?" And he goes, I don't know. Thankfully, they had what the U.S. called *69 at the time, which lets you
Yeah.
call back the most recently called number. And of course, with caller ID, that wasn't quite as necessary anymore. But yeah, so but yeah, my last name is pronounced Backe. It rhymes with hockey. And what I've actually done is I've actually had it printed on my shirts. I have these purple polo shirts. I go to cons wearing, and it literally says Chris Backe, and then in parentheses rhymes with hockey, just to give people that little visual clue of how to say it right.
All right, perfect. So now we're recording. We know your name. What got you, what got you into board games? And could you introduce yourself in a little bit? I know you've done a lot over the past. I think you started in 2016, right? So it's 8 years of making board games, or
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, basically, just to rewind the clock here. I was born in Chicago, in the Chicago area, that is to say.
That's where I grew up, by the way. I grew up in Lake Bluff, which is just north of Chicago.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. So, grew up in Chicago. We moved to North Carolina when I was a kid. I went to college in Kentucky. And in 2008, I began teaching English in South Korea.
Mm-hmm.
And of all the things you can do as a 20-something-year-old, that seemed like a good thing to do at the time. And it was like you have those decisions that you look back and you go, that was one of the best decisions I could have possibly made in my life, full stop, no joke. And it was an excellent opportunity to get out and see the world, and just try something different. I became a travel blogger while there. I met a girl who became my wife, and together after 5 years of Korea, and getting married in 2013, we became digital nomads, and we traveled the world for 9 years. In 2022, we kind of began to settle down, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. We're taking a road trip across the U.S. This is summer and fall 2016, and in between days of travel and hours of driving, I have the opportunity to watch some of Will Wheaton's tabletop episodes.
Oh, that was such a great show.
Oh my gosh, yes. So this show was my introduction to modern board gaming, and You kids these days, you've got Tom Vassell, you've got Rado, you've got 1,000 other influencers playing games on camera. I just had Will Wheaton and his list of whippersnappers. But
Well, I think
yes,
that
I
was
know.
probably one of the best shows in my opinion. Just the
Yeah.
music in it. I remember reading about when Pandemic. I think it was Pandemic when Pandemic was on the
Yeah.
show, or no, it
Mm-hmm.
was Churro. Sorry, Churro.
Suro.
Yeah. When that was on the
Okay.
show, the game went out of print because they just couldn't keep up with the amount of
Yeah.
people that watched the show and went out and bought the game.
Nice.
So it was like
Awesome.
so influential, you know.
Yeah. And I think that really changed my opinion for like obviously I had board games growing up. When I was 12, I made a board game. But I think it was the tabletop episodes that really made me think about making a board game for real. Um, so we finally arrive at our ultimate destination of our epic road trip across North America, which was Florida in 2016. We have a few months in Florida to kind of ride out the winter because neither of us really like the cold. So I finally have a bit of time and energy to make a board game. And so my very first game was called Meandering Minions. It had some hand drawn permanent marker lines on a foam board, and it was probably not my best game ever, to put it mildly. But I finally got the courage together to create the first version of my first game, and I learned this playtesting night at a friendly local game store in Florida in 2016. And so I finally say, okay, let's do this. Um, and I mean, this is a scary thing to do, especially your first time. So I walk into the shop and I see all of these like nice printed, beautiful art games on the shelf, hundreds of them, and you can't help but wonder who's going to want to play my game. And and it's a scary thing, to put it
Mm.
mildly. But eventually, you sit down. Some people sit down with you. You play the game. You teach the game badly. They play. They have fun. They have notes. And eventually, I said, "Well, obviously, thank you for playing. If you guys will be back next week for the next event, I'll have a new version ready to show."
Yeah.
They did, and I did, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
The story had its fits and starts for a few years because we were still digital nomads, and trying to find playtesters while traveling is difficult because you never really create communities. You're just taking advantage of the communities that are already there. Um, Finding playtesters that also spoke good enough English to play the games was also occasionally challenging.
Mm-hmm.
But for a few years, I kind of soldiered on and struggled a bit with it, but attended cons, did some pitches, and as crazy as it sounds, COVID really changed everything.
Yeah.
Um, you get to the point where there's all of these lockdowns happening, and you go, okay, well, now what? That I didn't have. So yeah, so this is December 2019. We are in Warsaw, Poland, and I'm excited because we're about to arrive, and I've already know of at least one event to play test. It's just a Monday evening at the friendly local game store in Poland, and after sitting down talking with some folks, the the guy that runs the place was like, "Oh, do you know of this other group that meets on Wednesdays?" And I'm like, "No, tell me more." Oh yeah, so it's this group of Polish board game designers, and they're all young guys. They speak pretty good English. I'm sure you'd be welcome if you wanted to go. Would you like more information? Yes, please. So I get more information. I show up. We have some fun, and then I finally feel like I'm getting to be part of a community. No telling how long this will work, but let's ride it for as long as you can. So one day, I show up on the Wednesday, and the doors are locked, The lights are out and there's no one around. And I'm going, huh, okay. Is this a prank? Am I being punked in the some sort of Polish version? Nope, no one around. Okay, so I'll just kind of hang out in the lobby for a while to see who shows up, if anyone, if ever, and no one shows up.
Wow.
And I go, well, this is awkward. What do I do? Um, and right as I'm getting ready to leave, the security guard for the building kind of comes out and goes, kind of gives me that "What are you doing here?" sort of look. And he motions me to the door and just it says "Go." I'm like, okay, this is a really weird prank. Um, the next day, I see in the news that the NCAA men's basketball tournament has been canceled due to this new coronavirus thing that's happening. This is March 2020,
Yeah.
and the whole world's about to change. Um, so obviously, all of my playtesting opportunities have gone completely away. People are locked in their house for weeks on end now, and it's it's a hard time, right?
Mm.
And so eventually, I started joining the online playtesting opportunities. Remote playtesting was the first one that I found uh, from the group based in New York, and they had a really clever system for organizing all of the information about their playtesting and so on. And initially, it was just for the people that were part of the physical group, but over time, they realized that there were many others that wanted to join. Um, this was a great group, but I'm in Poland, they're in New York, and it's like a 6 hour time difference.
Yeah.
So when they do an event in the evenings, Eastern time, that's like really late European time. So um, I began wanting to do something kind of like that, but for people in European time zones. And I found a co-partner to help me make that with Ian Brocklebank, who's based up near Leeds. And yeah, we started virtual playtesting. That kind of probably put me on the map a little bit. Um, when you organize a thing, when you create a thing, um, you give people an opportunity to do something, and you're seen as the connector. You're seen as the authority because you get to you bring people together, and you are at the center of it all. So it's one thing. One thing I try to encourage people to do if you're looking to do something, whatever field it's in, board games or anything else. Create that community, keep the thing going,
Yeah.
give people a reason to come week in, week out. So, um, yeah, so virtual playtesting allowed me to really get games to the table suddenly during a lockdown more than I was able to get to the table during real world playtesting. So it was not uncommon to be playtesting something 3, 4, even 5 nights a week. And a funny thing happens when you can go from playtesting nothing to playtesting a bunch of things, and you have time to make a lot of games. I still have ideas from 2020 I haven't even touched yet. I just haven't had the time.
Yeah.
So
Awesome. Well, it's really cool that my story is quite similar to yours actually, because in 2020 is when I started taking it more seriously because of COVID.
okay,
Because we had just won a contest for a board game my brother and I had made together, a prototype.
nice.
And during lockdown, I couldn't do my normal job anymore because I used to just I was a full-time musician. I was doing a lot of live gigs and I didn't do those, but I was also kind of really getting into board games after we won the contest, and we were kind of working on this other game as well. And so when the lockdown happened, I was like, okay, let's try and see how I can, like, if I can, start making money from this in some way. So I founded a play testing, but it's a more centered towards blind play tests. So designers come to us or publishers come to us, and they pay us to blind test. So we read the rules and play test the game. And I've also forwarded a lot of people to virtual playtesting as well. Just people
Awesome.
who it doesn't fit as much. But anyway,
Yeah,
it's really cool, and I totally agree. Like, those online communities, whether you start a new one or become part of one, they can be really, really useful. I think
exactly.
one thing that
And
oh,
yeah,
go ahead.
what I was going to mention was since then, obviously, once things began opening up real world again, people began to go, well, what's going to happen to these virtual communities? And I was like, I mean, my playtesting schedule is full now. My games are making progress. I say, as long as people keep coming out, let's keep them going.
Yeah,
They were initially sort of this ad hoc created out of necessity sort of thing, but let's, as long as people are continuing to come and enjoying them and using them and finding value in it, let's keep it going.
yeah. One thing that it looks like, at least from the outside, you're really good at, and I wish I was better at, is how organized you are. Or I feel like you're, very, um, you're doing so many different things. Like the blogs, the virtual playtesting, designing games. Also, I think with No Box Games, you're doing publishing, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a lot. So um, I think the best way to say it is well, just to say yes, I get to be very busy. I get to do a lot of very different things,
Hmm.
and this does require organization on a few different levels. Now, I've not been formally diagnosed with ADHD, but I've had all of the symptoms for years,
Yeah.
um, and I don't like I've discovered the ways to kind of deal with things. So getting a diagnosis now is what I would just be confirming what I already know, and it might get me access to meds. I don't think I need them, but you know
Mm.
watch as I listen to this back in 5 years and going, dude, what were you thinking? Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, no. So in my office, I have three A2 sized dry erase boards, and for the Americans, take four pieces of letter size paper, put them in a 2x2 grid. That's basically an A2 size.
Yeah.
Um, for everyone else, you already know what A2 is, but yeah, three A2 sized dry erase boards, and they're just kind of split up of the different sort of categories. There's client work, there's collaborations, there's stuff I do for money, there's pitching, playtesting schedule, there's the list of games to develop slash iterate, there's some personal stuff, and this is hanging on the wall right behind my computer. So instead of having a to do list on a computer that might be abstract or forgotten about, this is literally there in my face. So it's harder to forget about it when when it's right there in front of you.
Mm.
Um, as far as like scheduling things, um, just got a classic large paper book calendar for all the stuff I need to do when I need to do it. And I'm old school when it comes to that sort of thing, but that's just the thing that works for me. Um, there's a big yearly calendar on the back of the door, and what I've been doing with that has been, obviously the things that are far out in advance, I want to have them in a place I can see them and remember them. But what I've also been doing is uh, tracking metrics, basically. Um, how many times did I pitch in a day or in a month? How many times did I play test? How many published games did I get to test?
Mm.
It was actually in December 2023 when I looked at like a lot of articles sort of coming out about the top 10 list. And I went, okay, I've only played like two of those and I haven't even heard of like three of them. And I'm like, okay, this is embarrassing.
Mm.
The advice you most commonly hear people say when it comes to games is play more games. And this is still absolutely solid advice. I was not following myself.
Yeah.
So I realized if I want to follow the advice I'm giving to other people, I need to wait for it, play more games. So, um, but yeah, so really just being organized and staying organized. Everyone finds their own way, but most of the time, people are only as organized as they have to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for listeners, my encouragement is find figure out what parts need to be organized. You know, figure out your preferred method. Do you like getting email reminders? There are ways of doing that. Do you like having an AI assistant in your ear telling you what to do and when to do it? There's ways of doing that. You know,
Yeah.
um, there is a system out there for everyone,
Yeah.
and it's on you to find the system that works best for you.
Yeah.
Paper notebooks and dry erase boards work for me. Some people put everything in their Google Calendar. So trial and error is the name of the game here. If you don't like one system, try a different one. Keep
Yeah.
going until you find a system that works for you.
Yeah, no, that is great advice. That reminds me of something. It's not directly connected to board games by any means, but I did read about it recently, and so it's in my head.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
It's have you heard of the Solomon paradox? It's something I heard about like just 2 days ago.
I think I've heard of it, but you've probably read it more recently, so go ahead.
Yeah, so it's basically, the story of King Solomon is that he was like the wisest king, right? And he had a lot of wisdom, but the paradox is that he was great at giving advice. Like when people would come to his like king's court, he'd give them great advice, but he was really bad at taking his own advice.
Hmm.
Like he had hundreds of wives, and then he'd tell people just have one, or like I remember he had like a lot of problems with his son, and like just a lot of like personal issues that he's telling other people not to do those things, but then
Yeah.
his life is kind of a mess. And so what they did is they did this study, which is they had people kind of give advice, and they had people also they monitored whether they were taking their own advice, and most people know what they should be doing but aren't
Hmm.
actually doing it. So that's the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because one thing I started doing this year was accountability calls. Um, and kind of like a fitness coach, but for board games.
Hmm.
And the intent here was to try to do something that would keep people on track as they're building as they're growing a game, as they're doing things. And one of my clients is a coach that coaches people in a different field, and they're also trying to get into making a pretty cool board game.
Hmm.
Um, and in our last call, they mentioned that they were having some trouble feeling motivated. That it just felt like other things were getting in the way. And I was like, okay, well, you're a coach, so let's flip the script here. Let's pretend I'm the student, you're the coach, and I'm like, so I've got all these things getting in the way. There's all these things that are preventing me from being creative. What should I do? And they're like, well, it's time to set some focus, and it's time to try these other things to see if they work. I'm like, okay, so that sounds like pretty solid advice, doesn't it? I didn't think about the Solomon paradox at the time, but obviously there's a lot of wisdom you already have,
Yeah.
and if you find yourself sharing it, wanting to help other people with it, why aren't you using it yourself? And it's there, it. Um, and I think some people, they just sometimes it's just this unconscious hang up. Um, but yeah, it's life is not as complicated as people often make it out to be.
Mm. Yeah. So back to board games.
And yeah, we're gonna get really deep here, aren't we? Now,
A board game, when it comes to, or just looking at your board game geek page, what made a really good impression on me is you had kind of a pitch of what you design. You had this very specific thing, which is I make simple like games that are up to 30 minutes with variable player counts, or something along those lines. But it was very straight to the point, and I know that I'm not going to expect your game to be something like Twilight Imperium or you know, um,
Yeah, yeah.
and yeah.
When I started making games, I wanted to. Yeah, it wasn't initially a branding thing, but it was definitely a sense of. I got to meet some people that were a little bit skeptical about playtesting
Hmm.
because no playtester on the planet wants to go, okay, we're going to sit here and learn rules for 45 minutes and then we're going to play a broken game for 3 hours. No one in the history of playtesting has ever liked that.
Yeah.
So by putting myself out there as the game takes 20, 30 minutes, or like what I also started doing early on was I would tell people if we don't go from opening the box to playing in 5 minutes or less, I will buy you a drink. Now, part of this was confidence. Part of it was also just the feeling that I'm putting my money where my mouth is. Um, and I did have more than one person go, okay, go. And they started a little timer on their phone. And at that point, I went, right. So let's just jump right into the teach, shall we? Um,
Did you end up ever
but
buying drinks?
so in 6 years of making it that sort of promise, I had yet to pay out.
Mm,
I have sometimes, if I've been playtesting with designers, I'll sometimes tell them, if you can break my game, I'll buy you a drink. And I have paid out for that.
mm,
So, but yeah, easy to learn, easy to play games. Um, 5 minutes to teach, 20, 30 minutes to play has historically been my sweet spot. Although that is beginning to expand a bit. I'm definitely getting into some party games now. There's a couple of sign games that are closer to medium weight, and I'm really excited to see where they go.
yeah. Yeah. And another thing, we shared accommodation in 2021 at Essen, and there's a big contrast between having you be like you took on the role then as like the host of the space, and everything was super well organized and everything. And last year, I was almost with the same people. I was with Ian, Ben, and Ben's brother.
Okay.
And it was a pretty different experience not having you around. But I feel like at conventions as well, you you just you have this very tight schedule. You pitch your games to a lot of different publishers. And what I want to ask you, because I feel like that's a lot of people ask, what's the next step? I have this game. It's working
Hmm.
pretty well. I'm happy with it. How do I show it to a publisher? How do I get somebody to, invest their money and time into this? And I feel like you've definitely pitched a lot more than I have. So,
Yeah.
what's your advice on that?
Okay. So yeah. So obviously the conventions are an amazing time to meet publishers. Full stop. Um, at the same time, they because they're such an amazing time and because they're so busy for everyone, they you want to make the best use of the time you possibly can. Part of this was because I'm going to spend a lot of money to get there to enjoy the thing. So in my mind, if I'm going to spend the money, let's do it correct. Let's do it as not as efficiently as I can, but as well as I can to make me feel like I got the best use of the time and effort and money. So to that end, usually a few months before a convention, I'll start researching the publishers that are going. Um, and the goal here is basically to pitch correct. It's never to say, hey, I'm going to spray and pray this one game to 100 publishers. Don't do that. Um, but looking ahead to say, okay, so this company's going. I've pitched them game A, B, and C in the past. So try to avoid pitching them the same games. But also, what have I learned from those pitches? If I've taken notes, for example, can I derive anything from them? Maybe I'll even reach out to them ahead of time to be like, hey, I'm coming to the con. What would you like to see this year? And if you have their personal emails or their corporate emails, whatever you might have, sometimes they're Facebook friends. Publishers are gamers too. They like playing games. Um, but when it comes to pitching, really just the first thing to know is that it is tougher now than it's ever been. This is the cold hard reality check you've been waiting for. More games coming out than ever before, and no one has the time to play them all. So, right now, for a quote unquote good enough game, do not take your good enough game and hope it will do well. You know,
Mm.
a great game. Make the best version of this game you can. And if you don't think you can get the game to a good enough to a great state, I'd be so bold as to say, put it aside for a while, play with some other ideas, keep workshopping it, keep playing with it. Sometimes you'll take a good game to someone else, and they'll have an idea that makes it a great game, and that's great. That's what you need. But we're at a point in the world of games now where just having one good idea in a game is not enough. People are looking for thematic hooks, mechanical hooks, component hooks, other gimmicks, table presence, and each publisher prioritizes these things in different orders, but the goal is always the same for them. Publisher wants to make a great game that they can sell, and that last part, that they can sell, is the key. If they can't sell it, it's not going to be. It's like some people. I can imagine some games are great games, but they're not great products. And a publisher is tasked with making a great game a great product. At some point in the process, this whole thing goes from being a creative endeavor to a process of putting a price tag and a game in a box and then selling it to people. And if you're self-publishing, you already know this, and then you've already started working towards this. If you're looking to pitch a publisher, that same work still has to be done. It's just being offloaded to someone else who has to think about these things through that lens. So when pitching publishers, come correct. Make sure they have the information they need to see what a great game it is, and be ready to talk about it. Sell sheets are have been commonplace for a while now. Videos are now becoming pretty commonplace as well. I look at a video, nothing fancy, 2 to 3 minutes. I'm looking at a video now as a more common requirement than it's ever been.
Mm.
And part of this is because, part of this is empathy. Come back to what is going to help you. Pretend you're a publisher for a minute, and pretend you're just being inundated with all of these different designers, all of them wanting you to publish a game. And you're like, oh my gosh, how do I even start looking at all these? A video is a good way of seeing the basics of the game. So if you're a publisher, you can probably do a lot of quick no's to a game for any number of reasons. It might not be a fit for the kind of games we make. It's not on brand. I got a note from a publisher one time because it wouldn't fit their size box. And at first I was like, wait, what? And they explained, that we make games in 2 sizes of boxes. We've got big games, or we have medium-sized games in medium-sized boxes, and small games in small boxes. Our small box games sell for this price point, our medium games sell for this price point, and those are our 2 sort of lines.
Mm.
And the game I pitched him at the time didn't fit either of those lines. Okay, so just from a pure product perspective, my game didn't fit, and that's totally fair. And it's one of those things that now that I know that, I've taken notes on that, and so when I go back next time, I can say, okay, this game fits your small box line. It's got X cards and this many pieces, and in this game, you're a ... So I'm at least getting past that first hurdle. You can think about the pitching process as the Olympic 110-meter hurdle event, if you like. Every so often you're running and you're jumping and you're running and you're jumping, and that's just the event. Um, Sometimes you're going to get a no for reasons that aren't fair and reasons that have nothing to do with your game. I dare say most of the time I've gotten a no, it's because of that. Sometimes it's been, oh, we just released a deck builder, so we don't need another deck builder. Or I actually heard this one time. Our owner doesn't like deck builders, so we're never going to make one.
Yeah.
You have just made the best deck builder since Dominion, and it has zero chance with this company because of a personal preference.
Yeah.
That's not fair. Okay, just get it out there and say it. That's not fair, but that is how it is. And as much as I hate that saying, yeah. So keep going is the encouragement. Keep pitching. Keep looking. Keep considering, and keep researching. Um, a game is published from a combination of things, and it sometimes just comes down to the right idea at the right time, to the right person, with the right relationship, and then coming down to the right execution of the idea.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. I know some people, and sometimes they are right about this, but they do say, "Oh, it's important that my idea is good," and I've kind of showed what the game idea is, but the publisher will finish it, right? They'll develop it.
Hmm.
In your experience, I mean, my personal preference is like do as much work as you can beforehand. Make their
Hmm.
job as easy as possible. But do you think it's okay to go into a pitch meeting with a game that's um, it's got a great idea, but isn't finalized, so it's
Okay.
not polished.
So yeah. So my personal preference is to make the publisher's job as easy as I can. I want it to be as easy as possible for them to say, yes, this is a great idea. Let's sign it, and then if and as we need to, we'll continue developing it. The goal is not to go, okay, I've got this idea, and yeah, you can just take it from here. You know, um, it's almost like um, I'm trying to think of a good metaphor here. So I think it's something like designers look at their games sometimes like this really heavy box, and I'm carrying this really heavy box, and I'm waiting for someone else to take this heavy box off of me. Please take my game, carry it for me.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's a weird metaphor, but let's run with it for now. Um, you know, um, and as you're designing games, this box gets heavier and heavier because you just want to see it published. And please, someone just help me with this heavy box. No, it's not a heavy box. Let's change the metaphor to something else. This is a thing I'm proud of. It's a thing I've made. I can't wait to see it out there, but it's going to change because of just the nature of how games get made. You know, even after they're signed, games will change, sometimes significantly. Um, and the thing to consider is that a publisher is going to change things, or a publisher may need to change things to make it more commercially viable, to fit a certain box size, to fit a certain price point, and on one level, you need to be okay with that. And some designers are going to go, well, yeah, I'm okay with that, but let's just sign it and get on with the process. Well, hold your horses. Some publishers want the designer to be involved in as much of that as they can, and sometimes it's a process designers aren't used to being a part of. Well, what do I do? How do I work with you? And that's a tough question to answer because each publisher does things differently. Some publishers are really happy to um, tell the designer, well, we've got our own in-house development team, and we'll take it from here. We'll play test things, and then when we have something to show you, we'll bring you in and we'll do a quick catch up. Um, some publishers are very interested in having the designer assist the development team to continue developing the game. Um, and by bringing in other people, you get that fresh infusion of ideas and whatever. I
Yeah.
don't quite feel like I've answered your question.
No, you have.
So,
It's perfect. You're. I'm enjoying it, definitely.
okay.
Um, yeah, it really depends. The thing is also that it's a pretty small industry, so I think we don't have as many standards as you'd think. Like sometimes you'd
Yeah.
see this huge publisher, that's done hundreds of games, and they work completely differently in a completely
Hmm.
different fashion to another huge publisher.
Yeah.
And I think you want to kind of be flexible and just work with them with whatever their process is. And
Exactly.
with smaller publishers, I find that they tend to be a little more flexible. And I remember there's a Reiner Knizia quote, at least I think it's a Reiner Knizia quote, that's your first games you want to pitch more to smaller publishers because his argument is they'll kind of put more, they'll invest more in it because
Hmm.
it's going to be their main project for them. Whilst if you give it to a large publisher, then it's gonna be one of their 5, 10 that come out this year.
Hmm.
What are your thoughts on that?
So,
Yeah.
well, it's hard to argue with a doctor and a person who's transformed the industry. Um, though off the cuff, yes, he obviously has a point. Um, I think there's a lot of small publishers out there that do really good work, and there's a lot of folks out there that are doing the best that they can. Um, I think there are sometimes economic realities that sometimes get in the way. So my my advice would be, don't worry about pitching the size of the publisher. Look at what they want to do with it. Um, and obviously, sometime for some people, uh, it might be the first game that they make, and so understanding their intent. What is this to them? Is this a side project? Is this something that they? Is it a platform for something else? Um, how are they approaching the business of board game publishing? Because this is the part where the rubber meets the road. If I make a bad decision signing a game, I might not lose a lot of money offhand, but I will lose time and momentum. So, for example, yeah, smaller publisher, um, like everyone starts with the best of intents, um, and sometimes for reasons that are again totally unfair, they may have a tough time delivering on those promises. So um, it's unfortunate, and it's just part of the reality that things happen. But I wouldn't just pitch small publishers as a first-time designer. Um, I pitch people that I think are going to be the best fit.
Mm.
And if that happens to be a French publisher and you're based in the U.S., then pitch them. If you think a Portuguese publisher is the perfect fit because of what you've seen of their brand, pitch them. You know, um, the worst they'll say is no.
Yeah.
Um, beyond that, I think the other thing that's really important to consider is what you're doing with your game between pitches. The the incorrect answer here is, oh, it's just sitting on a shelf waiting for my prince to come.
Mm.
No, keep working on it. Keep developing it. Keep testing it. Keep showing it off. Keep building your profile.
Yeah.
And
One
go ahead.
really good thing about pitching to publishers is a lot of the time they'll tell you why they aren't picking it up. At least
Yeah.
I've gotten so many emails back where they say, "Okay, we don't want to pick this up, but here's how we felt playing it, and here's the reason we aren't picking it up." And I
Hmm.
think thinking about that and being like, okay, is this something that I want to solve, or is it just I want to go to a publisher that won't care for that specific thing? And most of the time, the publisher has been right about the thing that they've given as feedback.
Mhm.
So these are most of the time these are people who play a lot of games, and the feedback that they give you, take seriously, right?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And this is a part where I need to remind people that publishers, while they have to look at things through the lens of a business, when they play a game, they're also looking at things through the lens of their customers, their players, and as a player themselves. And they are giving you for free industry advice, industry insider advice that you'd be paying a serious amount of money to learn from anyone else. Listen to them. And when you get more than one person saying the same thing, this game felt too long, or the end of the game dragged on, or whatever. This can be a bitter pill to swallow, but it is absolutely the thing you have to listen to, because these are experienced, game players that typically know what they're talking about. Um, and it's usually when you hear the same advice uh, from different people in unrelated tests, that's usually when I really sit up and pay attention, because they're all different people in different circumstances are recognizing what sounds like the same issue.
Yeah. One thing that you are known for, I feel like, or at least it's something I talked with Ben about recently, is you have player aids in all of your games, and you do a great job with having a reference and getting people playing as quickly as possible, like you said. What are ways, and what should be on a player aid? What shouldn't be on a player aid?
Sure. Okay. So obviously, reference cards, player aids. I am personally of the belief that no game is too simple for a reference card or a player aid. If I were making Uno today, I would have a reference card for Uno,
Wow.
because even in Uno, you've got different cards that mean different things. They're all languageless and they're usually pretty easy to pick up. But if I haven't played Uno before, I might see this card that it's the draw four card. But what does that mean again? It's a different color. It's a different shape and style. But yeah, the rule about what happens when if you play, can you play another draw four card on top of that, make the next person draw eight? No. Um, so confirming rules, um, but really establishing the core loop. What do you do on your turn? That's the primary goal of my reference cards. Um, this is really helpful for things like order of operations. On your turn, take two actions. And if these actions need to happen in a specific order, then make sure that is listed from top to bottom. If if there's a different cost for different things, then that's a good thing to put in there. So on your turn, take two actions. As one action, you can do dot dot dot. As two actions, you can do dot dot dot. As a free action, you may dot dot dot. Um, every word counts here, and everything on a reference card is meant to be not the full, unabridged um, version of the rule, but the easy to read and parse version of the rule. The goal is not the goal should not be for the reference card to replicate the rule book, just to remind people of the rule. And this is really helpful, especially in online playtesting. For whatever reason, people have a tough time keeping quite as much information on on their screen. The screen is smaller than your average field of view, so it's harder. It's like you're always looking at the world from a very zoomed in perspective. So on one level, I found it helpful for that, but I also make the reference cards for real world play as well. But yeah, just coming from this perspective of helping people remember how to play. And I think if that's done well, it's one of those things that can make a simple game feel simple, and even a complicated game feel simpler, because the elements are known, they are executed on. People feel more competent to play, and they feel like they're able to play more competently, more correctly, which helps things feel a bit more confident.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect. And what I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, but what
Bring it
would
on.
be one thing that you've learned over these years in making board games that has significantly made your life easier or that has made you a better game designer?
Huh. Um, I think the biggest thing is empathy. Um, so we game designers, we often it's very easy for us to forget that people learn games in different ways, different styles, and if I'm playtesting if you're teaching a game in the real world, uh, you have the benefit of seeing someone's body language, of seeing how they're reacting to things. Um, and if you have the chance, um, obviously, that quizzical, puzzled look that you'll see on someone's face, as if to say, "Huh? I don't get that." You know. So empathy starts as a habit of creating, of being reminded of how other people think is different from your own way. Um, I'm sure everyone's heard the saying or the phrase, you know your game best. Everything makes sense to you in your game, but it won't for other people because they didn't spend hours and hours making the game. So they're learning the rules and the systems based on their own systems of intuition and understanding. So this sometimes means explaining things in a couple of different ways or with a couple of different wordings. Um, but it also goes back to just asking questions. All right, so I've taught you this one system here. Any questions on this so far? And I'll just I'll leave that nice little pause there because inevitably someone will have a question, and I'd rather answer question about system one, having just taught system one. Okay, so we understand the system now. Let's play, and we'll usually play around. Everyone takes a turn. Okay, so that's a full round. Any questions so far? So on one level, what I'm trying to do is build competency in playing, but I'm also wanting players to feel like they always have the ability to ask questions, and they always do. But taking that time to explicitly ask, and please don't just go, okay, any questions? Okay, great. You know, give it some time. Even go so far as to look at each person and get a specific, nope, I'm good. You know, that affirmative response that I don't have any questions. Um, and it's very easy to skip that because we're always tempted to move a playtest going faster and faster. But um,
Yeah,
I'm thinking of it now as like good form.
for
If you go to the
sure.
gym and you're going to do an exercise, you know that form is really important. If you have bad form, it can hurt you. But you can cheat a little bit. You can lift a little bit more weight if you give up your form. That can have longer term repercussions that aren't worth getting into right now. But um, think of this as good form
Yeah.
to ask people if they have questions, to remember the human. Um, Not everyone learns the same way. Some people are very, very visual learners. Some people are auditory learners. Some people latch on to the color of a thing, like an icon. Some people latch on to the shape of an icon. So even though something like double coding is uh, it's often seen as a way of addressing color blindness. I also look at it as a way of saying I see red things and I see green things, I see blue things, and the color is what helps me understand this thing does this action or has this implication or whatever. And some people are shape people. I see squares, and seeing a square, or when I see a square, I know that means dot dot dot. The color is almost irrelevant to them.
Yeah. That is huge, just huge. And thinking about my experience, because I've had many experiences. I won't mention any names here, but I have had a lot of times when not a lot actually. I'm happy that I haven't had a lot of times, but I have been with designers where and I could it could be a blind test where I'm being paid to give feedback,
Yeah.
and I've still been a little bit scared of giving feedback because the designer has will come up with will kind of get defensive about the
Hmm.
game, and I totally get why your instinct could be that, but that is not helpful to your game, and also a lot of people, if they feel that you're defensive, they won't want to give you bad news, or they won't want to give you their actual thoughts, and they might keep stuff to themselves, and you don't want that. You
Hmm.
want all of it. Um, and of course, I've also been guilty of that. I remember playtesting an early version of a game, and I was like, oh, it's not really like I wanted to do more internal playtesting. And at the end of it, I could feel myself being like, oh, I know this isn't so good,
Yeah. Well,
but
in cases
yeah,
like that, I mean, in cases like that, when you can see that things aren't working, or when you can see that there's an obvious broken strategy or something has gone off the rails, um, I put that back on the designer. And there are two things we can do here. Obviously, you can tweak a rule, change a rule, fix the game as you're able in the moment. So you might recognize, okay, this thing giving you 3 power, that's way too powerful. So I'm going to nerf that right now,
yeah,
and I'm going to say, okay, this is now going to give you 1 power instead, and let's make it 1 power and 1 victory point, like 1.5 power, give or take. So you have the right as the designer to change the rules of the game during the game. Try not to do that, but you have the right to do that. Um, if you have to do that more than twice in a game, then I'd suggest stopping the game and then fixing it, coming back to it, because there's going to be a lot of other knock-on effects you're probably not seeing in that moment. But
yeah,
just as a way of keeping a game going for another round or two, that's totally fine. You also have the right to stop the game. If you've already seen what you need to see, there's no reason to keep playing. Um, and what I think that does is it shows respect for the playtester's time and energy. There's no reason to continue playing a broken game. You know, they might be curious to see what happens when dot dot dot, and that's valid. But you have the right to bring a game to completion before the game is over. Um, and there will be times when the playtester is like, oh no, I'm actually really curious. Okay, let's let them play. But I would I would err on the side of short versus long. The last thing you want to do is make a playtester play after they've said or are non-verbally showing that they're basically done. They're ready to go to feedback. You know,
yeah,
um, yeah, go ahead.
yep. No, perfect. I've got two final questions for
Sure.
you. One of them is actually to make my life a little bit easier. Who is somebody that you would like to hear from um, in an interview or podcast? And I'll do my best to reach out.
Yeah. Gosh. I don't think I've looked through the whole list. Have you interviewed Justin Gary yet?
I have not. I would love to actually. That's a great.
He is.
I listen to his
Yeah.
podcast very often. So
Yeah. I've always. It's always funny to hear, um, podcasters being interviewed by other podcasters. Um, and obviously he's been on the podcast creation side for a while. I'd be curious to hear his design thought processes. I'm sure he's got a lot of behind the scene notes from the mini games he's made.
yeah, yeah. For sure. Awesome. And the last question is one I ask everybody who's on the podcast: what would be your advice for somebody who's just starting out in game design?
Um, Start with the idea. that you're here to have fun. Um, you're probably not going to make a lot of money off of this. This is not an industry. People you don't go into this industry to make money. Going into this to make money is like taking a full-time job for the free coffee. Yes, there is free coffee at the office in most cases, and like most office drone jobs, but you're spending an awful lot of time and effort for that free coffee. So don't take a full-time job just for the free coffee. Don't get into this industry where you're going to spend lots of time and effort to make a few bucks. It's there, but it's not the point. We make games because we love games. We love the process of creating things. We love the iterative process of refining a game or refining an idea to find the best experience we can. Um, and just accept that process. It is an iterative process. You'll be wanting to change things all the time in the game. And even up to the point where it's published, and even after that, you might still go, "Yeah, I'm still thinking here. I would love to change things a little bit more." Still, it's going to become part of the habit,
Yeah.
you know. And the no game is ever done; it's just shipped. So um, just accept the iterative process. Um, be patient. Um, Part of this comes back to empathy, but also just being patient. Things never go according to schedule. No game in the history of humankind has ever been published on time.
Yeah.
You know, so there's lots of reasons why things might go off schedule, and we're all human. We've all got different things going on. But yeah, if you're just getting started with game design, um, play more games. You know, it sounds like really boring advice you've heard 1,000 times, but it's still true. What you're doing when you play games is you're building this vocabulary of themes and mechanics and ideas. And what you get to do when you make games is you combine two things that hadn't been combined before. You add a twist to them. If all you've played are chess and risk, the games you're going to make are going to be chess and risk. If you play a lot of games, you've got a lot more combinations and permutations to go after.
Yeah. All right. Perfect. That is great advice. I totally agree with it. And thank you so much for being a guest. I really enjoyed talking to you and hearing what you have to say.
Yeah, thanks for having me, buddy.